Hi everybody and welcome to Ewe University. I'm Dr. Kelly. We are having a very soggy and cold weekend. All of a sudden the weather has turned from spring-like to feeling like November with wind and rain and chilly temperatures. So it's one of those weekends where you just feel like curling up with your knitting or hanging out in your craft room, which is what I'm doing. Yesterday, I made some cards to send out, which I haven't done in several weeks. I got some new paper and stamping supplies a few weeks ago, but I haven't even been able to try them out. So I finally had the chance to do that. And I made some thank you cards and some general greeting cards. Here's one of the thank you cards I made. I really like the simplicity of the paper pattern. This pattern paper is new. I also used a flower medallion that I hadn't used before, and I think that turned out really pretty. And then I stamped the circle of dots and punched out the circle and put the sentiment in the middle. So these are all ready to go, and I'm sending out some cards to reply to people who had sent me notes over the past few weeks. Now, you guys know how much I love old-fashioned correspondence and snail mail. And this week, I heard about a new postage stamp that's going to be released in June. It sounds really neat because it's going to feature a special effect never seen before on a postage stamp. It has to do with the solar eclipse, which, if you haven't heard, is going to be seen in the US on August 21st. This is the first solar eclipse, total solar eclipse, that we'll have been able to view since 1979. And the eclipse will travel across the entire country from Oregon to South Carolina over a period of 90 minutes. So in this map, you can see exactly where the total eclipse will be visible. And then the farther north and south you get away from its direct path, different levels of partial eclipse will be seen. So this new postage stamp is going to be released on June 20th, which is a couple of months before the actual eclipse. The really exciting thing about the stamp is that it's the first time that thermochromic ink has been used on a postage stamp. Now, thermochromic ink changes in different temperatures. Printed on the stamp is an image of the solar eclipse, basically the light of the sun being blocked out by the moon, and all you can see is the sun's corona. But if you hold your thumb on the stamp or rub your fingers on the image, your body heat will reveal an underlying image of the moon, and then the image will go back to the eclipse again once it cools. Pretty nifty, huh? Oh, and on the back of the sheet of stamps will be a map showing where the eclipse will be visible. So yeah, we are all going to have to run down to the post office on June 20th and get a hold of some of these really fun stamps. Now, before I get to my knitting, I wanted to share with you a product that I purchased a couple of months ago and that I've really been enjoying. It's not really related to knitting, but I like it a lot and I thought I would just show it to you. And these are headbands that have hinges like sunglasses. They are called square bands, S-Q-H-A-I-R, square bands. And when you want to open them, or when you want to wear them, you just open them up, and the temple tips even have rubbery grips, just like sunglasses. So you just put them on your head to hold your hair back like you would your sunglasses if you slid your glasses back over your head. They do have these little comb pieces underneath the top, like a regular headband, but the sides don't press into your head at all, and they don't give you a headache like a lot of headbands do, to me anyway. Because a lot of headbands are shaped, well, here's a regular headband. A lot of headbands are shaped like this, and you have to pull the ends apart. And when you put it on your head, the ends squeeze your temples, and it can be really uncomfortable. Or sometimes they're so loose that they just fall out of your hair. But look at the difference in the design of these headbands compared to the traditional headband shape. This one is way more comfortable and holds your hair back really well. So square bands come in all different colors and patterns. I've got white and I've got this taupe one. You can get them plain, or you can get them with these pretty little crystals, sparkles on the temple. The plain ones are $12.50, and the ones with the little crystals are $15. They also have some patterned ones like zebra print, tortoiseshell, houndstooth, and those are $20. So I will put a link to the Square Bands website in the information box below, so you can go check them out if you are interested. I really like these and find them to be very comfortable. I've been wearing them a lot, and I'll probably wear them a lot more in the summer. So I think somebody should have invented these a long time ago. Since I finished the knee socks last week, I was looking through some old projects that had been hibernating for a while, and I found another pair of socks that I had started way back last August. So I thought, why not pick these up and give them some love? When I rediscovered this project, I had the first sock done down to the heel flap and turning the heel. And because I've decided that I love knitting 2 at a time socks now, I went ahead and cast on the second sock. And I'm going to knit that down to the same spot. So for the first sock, I'm using the strand of yarn coming from the center of the ball of yarn. And for the second sock, I'm using the yarn coming off the outside of the ball. And as you can see, I've been able to knit a few inches on the second sock, so this one is catching up to the first one. I would be happy to have these done in the next couple of weeks, so we'll see if I'll be able to do that. I guess at this point, the project is in sophomore status. Maybe after I turn the heel on the second sock, it will progress to junior status. Now, I'm not using a formal pattern for these socks as usual. I'm knitting them top down. I just cast on 72 stitches, and for these socks I used 3x1 ribbing at the top for about 1 inch, then switched to stockinette stitch. I usually do around 6 or 7 inches for the leg and then start the heel flap. Now the yarn that I'm using for these socks is Manos del Uruguay Alegria, which is 75-25% superwash merino nylon blend. It is fingering weight, and the colorway is called Colombina. It is mostly a white yarn with blue, red, and a little bit of gold and black speckles in it. Really an interesting colorway, different than any other yarn that I've had. And as always, I'm knitting these socks on little 9-inch circular needles, US size 1 or 2.25 millimeter. And that is all the knitting I have to show you this week. Today I wanted to tell you about an audiobook that I recently finished entitled The Last Painting of Sarah DeVos by Dominique Smith. This book is a historical drama set in 17th century Holland, 1950s New York, and 21st century Australia. As the novel opens, it is 1957, and lawyer Marty de Groot and his wife Rachel are preparing for a dinner party in their Manhattan home. This is a fundraiser that Marty and Rachel have hosted annually for a decade. But this year, as the party goes on in the dining room, thieves slip into the bedroom and steal a painting that hangs above the bed and replace it with a fake. The stolen painting is exceptional, not only because it has been in Marty's family for over 300 years, but also because it is one of the few surviving works by an obscure Dutch artist named Sarah DeVos, who was one of the few female master painters in Holland during the Baroque Golden Age. In 1631, Sarah had been the first woman to be admitted to the Guild of St. Luke. The painting is a poignant winter scene painted as a memorial to her daughter, Catherine, who died at age 7 of the plague. A mild fixation on the painting shifts into a fixation on the artist who created the forgery, Ewe Shipley. At the time, Ewe was a struggling graduate student in art history, writing her dissertation on the elusive Sarah DeVos. In order to make ends meet, she takes a job as an art restorer and is hired by a shady art dealer to forge a copy of Sarah DeVos's painting. She creates an exceptional forgery that is almost indistinguishable from the original, but then spends the rest of her life haunted by her immoral decision. She eventually becomes an academic, and over 40 years later, curates an exhibit about female painters of the Dutch Golden Age for the Art Gallery of New South Wales, setting the course for her dark secret to be exposed. Both the original and her fake are on their way to the gallery. Shifting perspective between the three characters, Marty, Sarah, and Ewe, creates a compelling narrative around the artwork. As the story circles the painting from various angles, it reveals the complicated way that people relate to art. Sarah projected her loss, pain, and darkness into the canvas. And Marty and Ewe are drawn to something in themselves that they see in the painting. Now, we know from the beginning that Sarah DeVos never existed and that there is no such painting. However, Sarah's character is based on the first women allowed to become members of the Dutch Painters Guild, and Dominique Smith gives her a detailed life. In the author's notes, he points out that at least 25 women were admitted to the Guild of St. Luke, but we know very little about most of them, and many of their works have either been lost or attributed to male artists. In fact, I read an interview with Dominique Smith, the author of this book, and he was talking about his inspiration for this novel coming from a real court case involving a dispute between two English art dealers. There was a painting that had been attributed to Frans Hals for 250 years when someone noticed an unusual and mysterious monogram in the bottom corner of the painting. This monogram was identified by an art historian as belonging to Judith Leyster, one of the first women to be admitted to the Guild of St. Luke during the 17th century. Subsequently, 7 more paintings which had been attributed to Hals were correctly attributed to Leyster. The idea that a female master painter had been erased from art history for hundreds of years stimulated Smith to write a novel about an obscure and evocative Golden Age painting. I really did enjoy the novel, and I learned a lot about art and art history. Dominique Smith obviously did a lot of research on which the book is based, so he can talk about artistic forgery with good authority, as well as the unique details of the characters in this book across the decades. Was it the best book I've ever read? No, but it was interesting and engaging. So I'm giving it 4 stars, and the reader, Edoardo Ballerini, was very good. I'll give him 5 stars. So again, that is the audiobook entitled The Last Painting of Sarah DeVos by Dominique Smith, which I recommend especially for fans of historical fiction and especially art history. Today in the classroom, we're going to be talking about synthetic fibers that are used to make yarn. In synthetic fibers, the chemical composition, structure, and properties are significantly altered during the manufacturing process. These are spun, woven, and knit into a huge number of products like shirts, scarves, hosiery, carpets, drapery, upholstery, and even industrial parts like drive belts and cellophane envelope windows. The chemical compounds from which synthetic fibers are produced are known as polymers, which are the same compounds that make up plastic and rubber. In general, these materials are prized for their strength, durability, and resistance to heat and mildew. Synthetic fibers are distinguished from natural fibers like wool, silk, and cotton because those fibers come out of the textile manufacturing process in a relatively unaltered state. Now, there are some synthetic fibers that are derived from natural fibers. For example, rayon was one of the first synthetic fibers ever to be produced, and it is made from wood pulp, a natural substance. But this natural substance is chemically treated and modified so that it can be used as a textile. Therefore, yarns made from ingredients like wood, pulp, bamboo, soy, milk, and seaweed are classified as regenerated or biosynthetic fibers. And I'll talk about those in a future video if you're interested in hearing about them. So let me know if you want to hear about how yarn is made from wood, bamboo, soy, milk, seaweed, and other natural products like this. Just leave a comment in the comment section below and let me know you're interested. Today I want to focus on the larger group of synthetic fibers that are made from polymers that do not occur naturally, but instead are produced entirely in a chemical plant or laboratory. These fibers are almost always made from byproducts of petroleum or natural gas. The most common synthetic fibers that we see in yarns are compounds such as acrylic and nylon. Most synthetic polymers are derived from hydrocarbon compounds, that is, compounds containing hydrogen and carbon, which are produced from refining petroleum and natural gas. These chemical reactions produce little plastic pellets that are sold by petroleum companies like ExxonMobil, BP, and Shell to fiber manufacturers. The plastic pellets are then heated to transform the polymer into a liquid state. Then this fluid polymer is forced through a head that has small holes in it called a spinneret. This production method was designed to mimic the silkworm's natural production of thread filaments. And I talked about silk production in a previous video that I will link below in case you haven't seen that. Anyway, in synthetic yarn, the tiny continuous strands of fiber that are produced solidify once they cool. Synthetic fibers can be produced in any diameter by changing the hole size in the spinneret. They can also be cut to any desired length or left uncut in one continuous monofilament fiber. All kinds of finishes are employed during the manufacturing process in order to improve the feel of the yarn or fabric when it's held in the hand, such as softness, drapability, and resilience. For example, crimp or waviness, similar to that of wool, may be introduced mechanically by passing the filament between rollers or by twisting the fibers together and then untwisting them so they'll retain that waviness. It's kind of like rolling your hair up in rollers, or when you braid your hair when it's wet and then take the braid out, and then when it's dry, you get that crimped look. And that's one way they get the crimp in synthetic fibers too. Now, various additives are also mixed into the polymer solution prior to creating the fibers. Some of the common ones are heat and light stabilizers, flame retardants, and chemicals to reduce the unnatural looking shine of synthetic fibers. Other finishes can reduce pilling, increase softness and smoothness, and decrease the accumulation of static electricity. Sometimes dyes are added to the solution with water or other special compounds designed to penetrate the fibers and bind to their chemical structure. Now, the original impetus for the invention of synthetic fibers was to mimic natural fibers and streamline the process of textile production. For example, silk was such a precious yet labor-intensive product. Maybe there was an easier and cheaper way to achieve that soft, drapey, luxurious nature of this prized fabric. So chemists around the world went to work on this challenge. And as I said a few minutes ago, rayon was one of the first artificial silk synthetic fibers produced, although it's really a biosynthetic fiber made from natural wood pulp rather than petrochemicals. And that was back in the late 1800s. The first truly synthetic fiber that was completely created in the laboratory was nylon in 1931. The advent of technology in the 1920s allowed scientists to look into the structure of natural fibers to see how they were constructed. And what they discovered was that the molecules that make up a fiber are long in fibers themselves. So that allowed them to start creating fibers in the laboratory. And by 1938, nylon was ready to be presented to the marketplace. Nylon was dubbed the miracle fiber, and its invention is considered a turning point for synthetics. It was invented by chemists at the DuPont company and was entirely produced from petroleum products. Once nylon went out into the market, it was used for everything from sewing thread to women's hosiery to parachute fabric. Industrial use of nylon included tires, ropes, fishing line, tents, toothbrushes, and even in the high-grade paper used to make U.S. currency. During World War II, nylon was the center of a big scandal when its production was appropriated for military use only. Nylon hosiery that previously cost $1.25 a pair were now being sold on the black market for 10 times that. Movie stars would auction off nylon hosiery for up to $40,000 a pair to raise money for the war effort. By the 1950s, chemical companies were researching other synthesized fibers like acrylic and polyester, which are essentially plastics. But these synthetic fibers were very appealing for domestic purposes. They are wrinkle-free and easy to care for. They don't shrink in the wash. Drying clothes in the clothes dryer became possible. Knitwear with higher durability became available. And during the 1960s and 70s, synthetics were widely popular, and especially polyester was used in a lot of fashion fabrics. In general, synthetic fibers are a lot more affordable than natural fibers. Nowadays, synthetic fibers have even more widespread use. Yes, we still have nylon, acrylic, and polyester, but we also have spandex, which will stretch over 500% of its original length. It is used in the Spanx that we wear, in addition to swimwear and athletic wear. A unique yarn called Retroglow reflects the light that shines on its surface. So when headlights of a car shine on this fabric, it becomes a brilliant white to the driver. This type of fabric is used to increase the safety of joggers, bicycle riders, and highway workers at night. Normally, the yarn is a dull gray in color, so it blends into fabrics unnoticeably during the day. So it provides nighttime safety without ruining the appearance of the fabric. Then there is Gore-Tex, which is completely waterproof and is used in thin layers for rain gear. And we also have Kevlar, which is used in industrial clothing for heat protection and bulletproof vests. And there are literally dozens and dozens of other synthetic fibers in the market today that are used not only in the textile industry, but also in thousands of other contexts worldwide. Now, let me talk a little bit about some general characteristics of synthetic fibers. First, they're known for being stronger than natural fibers. As such, they tend to last longer than a lot of other materials. So if you want to make durable items, this would be a good choice. You know this if you still have one of your grandma's crocheted afghans from 1972 made out of Red Heart acrylic yarn. You can throw them in the washing machine and dryer and not worry. They are pretty much indestructible and will last forever. Another key property of synthetic fibers is that they get stiff in cold temperatures. And the temperature is different for each fiber type. If you've ever worn a ski jacket made out of nylon, for example, you've probably felt it get stiff and make a crinkly sound when you move. On the other end of the temperature spectrum, synthetic fibers are more sensitive to heat than natural fibers. They tend to melt, whereas natural fibers will either burn, like cotton, or not be affected by heat at all, like wool. Therefore, acrylic yarn would definitely not be good for making pot holders or other items for use in the kitchen. You also need to be careful about ironing synthetic materials. Because synthetic fibers are made from oil-based products, most do not absorb water very well, or at all. But this makes them ideal for swim and sportswear, as it's easy to wash, quick drying, and stain resistant. It's also good for raincoats and umbrellas. Synthetic fibers are antimicrobial, meaning that they're not susceptible to mold and mildew. They're also free from the danger of insect infestation. Clothes moths, carpet beetles, and silverfish do not eat synthetic fibers. If you think about it, this makes sense because synthetic fibers are basically plastics, and that would not be very nutritious for insects to consume. They wouldn't live very long. Now, synthetic fibers are also non-allergenic. Some people believe they are allergic to wool and other animal fibers, so synthetic fibers like acrylic yarn can be a good choice for them. Because synthetic fibers are essentially made from plastic, they're not very biodegradable. So this means that once discarded, an item made from synthetic yarn will remain in landfills for many years to come. These are the least environmentally friendly yarns to produce. So people who want to live an eco-friendly life or who are concerned about chemicals in their products and the use of non-renewable materials will likely not want to use synthetic yarn. Now, let me touch on a couple of different synthetic fibers that are widely used in yarn production for knitting and crocheting, and those are acrylic and nylon. I'll start with nylon because it was invented earlier than acrylic. The first commercial production of nylon in the United States was in 1939. It is currently the second most used manufactured fiber in the US, polyester being the first. Nylon is a lightweight fiber with excellent strength and abrasion resistance. It has good elasticity and drape, and it can be machine washed. For most of us who knit or crochet or do other fiber arts, we see nylon in yarns blended with wool. Our main experience with wool and nylon blended yarn might be in sock yarn. A lot of knitters, including myself, like to have at least a little bit of nylon in their sock yarn to add strength and durability to the wool. That nylon helps with abrasion resistance in places like the heel of the sock that might rub on your shoe, and this makes the sock last longer. If it was just pure wool, the sock would get holes faster from that abrasion. So a lot of sock yarns contain maybe 10% or up to 25% nylon mixed with the wool, which capitalizes on the positive qualities of both the wool and the nylon. As far as the negative characteristics of nylon, nylon is not very good at absorbing water at all. It also breaks down by prolonged exposure to sunlight. So you might not want to dry your hand knit socks on your clothesline in the backyard in the direct sunlight. They would do better in the shade or just hanging on a rack in your house. So that's a little bit about nylon fiber. Now let's turn to acrylic yarn, which is very popular with knitters and crocheters. Acrylic was first commercially produced in 1950. It was marketed as a replacement for wool and soon became popular in sweaters and blankets. Consumers responded so well to acrylic because it was less expensive than wool and also machine washable. Acrylic is a lightweight fiber with a nice drape. It has good elasticity, warmth, and resistance to sunlight and weather. It is, on the negative side, it is very bad at absorbing water, even worse than nylon. I remember when I was a kid, my mom used to make knit mittens for my sisters and me out of acrylic yarn. And I remember playing in the snow in the middle of winter, and your mittens would be dripping wet and your hands would be freezing. Wool would be a much better choice for the mittens because the wool fibers will absorb moisture but hold it away from your skin, keeping your hands warm and dry. This is something acrylic yarn just can't do. Acrylic yarn is also notorious for pilling. You get those unsightly little fiber balls on the top of the fabric that are hard to get rid of because the acrylic fiber is so strong it doesn't want to let them go. And acrylic yarn can be prone to collect static electricity as well. But for the most part, acrylic is used to knit things like blankets, sweaters, and children's garments. Okay, so to wrap up this discussion of natural versus synthetic fibers, let me end by making one point. All yarn production involves resources: water, land, fuel, and labor. Just because a yarn is synthetic doesn't mean it's bad, or that a natural yarn is automatically good. I mean, you can think about this in a lot of other contexts. Tobacco is a natural substance. Petroleum is a substance found in nature, and even water is a chemical. Farming practices can involve lots of pesticides and use vast amounts of water to create natural fibers. The production of some synthetic yarns can use less water than some of its natural counterparts. Also, even people who prefer working with one type of fiber will often use different kinds of yarns based on the items they're creating. Wool yarn, silk yarn, cotton yarn, acrylic yarn, they all have their place. So I think the take-home message today is that each of us should know as much as we can about the yarns that we use in our crafting in order to make the best decisions for ourselves. It's something that each maker has to decide for him or herself, and hopefully I'm able to help out in some small way in doing that. Well, that brings us to the end of today's show. I hope you enjoyed hearing about synthetic fibers, what they're made from, how they're made, and their positive and negative properties. And now I'm wondering, what kinds of yarn are your favorites and why? Do you prefer working with natural fibers like wool or with synthetic fibers like acrylic? Or maybe a mixture of both? And what kinds of projects do you make with these types of yarns? Personally, I do prefer wool and natural fibers for the most part, but I will use acrylic yarn, especially when making something for a non-knitter who wouldn't know how to properly care for a wool garment, or who wouldn't want to take the time to hand wash things. Or sometimes things like baby clothes where it's going to get dirty a lot and it's so much easier to throw the item into the washing machine. So yeah, let me know what you do and what you like in the comment section below. You can also leave a comment if you have any questions about today's show, or if you have an idea for a future episode, or if you'd like to see a product tested. Leave your suggestions in the comment section below. I always love to hear from you, and I've gotten so many great questions and wonderful suggestions that I've already incorporated or put on my list for future videos. Thank you so much for spending some time with me today, and I'll see you in the next video. Next week, I really want to talk about sheep again, but this time I'm going to introduce you to some of the world's cutest sheep. These are some kind of obscure breeds that maybe you don't know about, or maybe you've never heard of before. I'll talk about them as well as the qualities of their wool. You definitely don't want to miss that. So until then, have a sparkly week, everybody.